If you'd asked me a year ago what my life would look like at 27, I would have said something safe. A decent job. A tiny apartment with plants I mostly kept alive. A social life built around group chats and cheap Thursday wine. Maybe, if the universe was feeling generous, a girlfriend whose idea of commitment didn't include ghosting across state lines. I definitely wouldn't have said, standing in the lobby of a glass-boxed marketing agency, clutching a company-branded notebook while my stomach tried to crawl up my throat. "Welcome to Lumen & Co." The HR coordinator chirped, handing me an ID badge with my photo on it. In the picture, I looked like someone who'd rehearsed her smile in the bathroom mirror 20 times and still didn't trust it. "Maya, right?" she said. "You're one of our new account coordinators. Orientations and conference be end of the hallway, big glass doors. Can't miss it." "Got it," I said, tucking a loose curl behind my ear. "Thanks." New job, new building, new people. New me. That was the plan, anyway. I'd left my last agency with a resume full of decent metrics and a heart that felt like someone had taken a red pen to it. The breakup had been spectacular in the worst way cross-country long distance. Missed calls, one final fight over FaceTime that ended with a screen going dark, and a silence that never really lifted. I promised myself aloud in my half-unpacked studio that this job would be about stability. No more late-night relationship autopsies. No more rearranging my life for someone else's. No more falling in love with people who treated emotional availability like a limited edition drop. Just work, growth, independence. Romance was an app I'd uninstalled. Permanently, I walked down the hallway, the soles of my new boots whispering on the polished concrete. The office hummed with the particular energy of creative people pretending to be calm. Glass offices lined the walls, full of plants and mood boards and whiteboards covered in colorful scribbles. Everything smelled faintly of coffee and ambition. I paused outside Conference B and took a breath. "You can do this," I told myself. "It's just a job. It's just a room full of strangers." I pushed the door open. 10 people sat around a long table, all in varying degrees of business casual. Someone from IT was setting up a projector. There were branded pens, tiny bottles of water, and a bowl of those mints that taste like chalk and nostalgia. "Hi," I said, forcing my mouth to cooperate. "Is this the new hire orientation?" "Yep," a guy in a denim shirt said. "You must be Maya. I'm Jared, social team." I introduced myself around. There were a couple other coordinators, a junior designer, someone joining HR, normal people with normal backstories they'd probably share later over microwave leftovers. I took a seat near the middle, not close enough to the front to look overeager, not far enough back to look like I was hiding. My hands smoothed my skirt automatically. I opened my notebook and wrote my name at the top of the page, as if I needed reminding. On the wall opposite us, a massive framed quote read, "We don't chase trends. We build stories." I exhaled, shoulders loosening a fraction. Stories I could do? I'd been building them for clients for years. For other people, at least. Okay. The HR coordinator said brightly, "We're just waiting on our creative director to kick things off. She likes to welcome new hires personally." Of course she did. I pictured a woman in her 40s, maybe in an expensive blazer and statement glasses. Someone whose PowerPoint game was terrifying. The door opened behind me. I didn't turn at first. I was busy writing remember to ask about PTO in the corner of my page, like a responsible adult. Then a voice said, "Good morning, everyone." "I'm sorry, I'm a few minutes late. Traffic on 3rd was a nightmare." And the pen rolled out of my hand. Because the voice swarm, low, with that slight upward lilt on apologies, was when I hadn't heard outside of memories and nightmares in almost 5 years. I looked up. She was there, Alyssa, the woman who'd once fallen asleep on my shoulder in a college library at 3 in the morning, mumbling campaign slogans in her dreams. The woman who bought the cheap coffee and the expensive notebooks when we were 20. The woman who told me she loved me across a pixelated video call and then disappeared from my life like someone had pulled her plug. She stood at the front of the room in a charcoal dress and a blazer that fit too well to be off the rack. Her hair was shorter than when I'd last seen her, curling just under her jaw, a few strands silver at the temples that somehow made her look more grounded, not older. She was holding a tablet and a reusable coffee cup with the agency logo. There was a small nick on her left brow I didn't remember, and the familiar tiny scar on her wrist from where she'd once sliced it, open on a badly washed martini glass in my first apartment. She looked good, healthy, successful, like every late-night LinkedIn search I'd sworn. I wasn't making head bang, quietly telling the truth. She looked up from her tablet. Our eyes met. The world did that thing they do in movies where the sound drops out and everything blurs at the edges. Time didn't so much stop as stagger. Her expression flickered. For a heartbeat, she wasn't the creative director of Lumen & Co. She was the girl on my dorm room floor, laughing so hard she spilled popcorn everywhere. Then her professional mask slammed into place so fast I almost heard it. If you're all here for orientation, you're in the right place, she said, voice steady. I'm Alyssa Hart, creative director. Jared leaned over and whispered, she's kind of a legend. Like I hadn't once known the exact pattern of freckles on her shoulders. Welcome to Lumen, Alyssa went on, eyes skimming the room, studiously not lingering on me. We're excited to have you. We move fast here, but we try to make sure no one gets left behind in the chaos. Her gaze drifted back like a magnet fighting a weak, stupid field. It landed on me? Her pupils widened, just a fraction. The hand holding the tablet tightened so subtly I wouldn't have seen it if I hadn't spent years reading that body for signs of stress. Her voice dipped just slightly when she said, Welcome to the team, Maya. My name in her mouth felt like a key turning in a lock I'd welded shut. 10 pairs of eyes glanced between us, sensing something but not sure what. I forced my face into something neutral and professional, the same expression I practiced in the mirror when I rehearsed for interviews. Thank you, I managed. The HR coordinator sailed on with her script, passing out forms and talking about benefits. People laughed at the right moments. Someone asked about the office coffee situation. I wrote notes I didn't read. I heard none of it. All I heard was a buzzing under my skin, the echo of 100 conversations Alyssa and I had never finished. This is a coincidence, I told myself. The universe isn't that dramatic. She's just here. Like you are. People move. They get jobs. They show up in conference rooms 5 years later wearing blazers that cost more than your rent. You can handle this. Except now my new job, the fresh start I promised myself, came with a complication. I hadn't written into the script. My ex was my boss. And whether I liked it or not, the past I'd buried under new email signatures and carefully curated LinkedIn posts had just walked into the room in heels and a tailored jacket and said, Welcome to the team. Here's the thing about marketing agencies. They love buzzwords. Synergy, alignment, collaboration. What they don't put on the posters is the phrase forced proximity, which sounds like a HR violation and a romance trope at the same time. I found out Alyssa was my direct manager the afternoon of my first day. I was at my new desk, a rectangle of wood and metal with a decent chair and a monitor that didn't flicker when I breathed near it, settling my few personal items into place. A plant, a pen cup shaped like a cat, a photo of my brother pulling a stupid face. I'd just finished logging into the project management software when my inbox pinged with my first calendar invite. Kickoff, Briley Hotel's campaign from Alyssa Hart attendees. Alyssa Hart, Maya Shah, strategy lead, design lead. I stared at it. Everything okay? The woman at the next desk asked. Her name was Priya. She'd introduced herself over lunch, offering half her fries like a peace treaty. Yeah, I said, just first real meeting. She leaned over conspiratorially. With Alyssa? Don't worry, she looks scary, but she's good people. Just bring at least one idea and don't pretend to know things you don't. She hates that. Noted, I said, adding don't panic to my mental checklist. At 3 o'clock, I walked into a smaller conference room, Rehearsal lines of, "You can do this," looping in my head. The strategy lead, Mateo, sat with a laptop open. The design lead, Rachel, had a notebook full of thumbnail sketches and the exact air of someone who hadn't slept properly since 2019. Alyssa stood at the whiteboard, sleeves rolled up, scribbling the hotel chain's name in big letters. She'd swapped her blazer for a soft gray sweater that made her look unfairly approachable. "Perfect timing," she said when I came in. "Grab a seat, Maya." My name again. It still fit differently coming from her. I sat, flipping open my notebook. My heart thudded in my throat as she started the meeting. "Okay," she said, underlining Briley twice. "They want to reposition from affordable but forgettable to approachable boutique luxury." She made a face. "Whatever that means. We've got 8 weeks to concept and execute a new campaign before their summer push. It's a big one. Their budget is healthy. Let's not screw it up." She glanced at me. "Maya, your background's in hospitality, right?" "Yeah," I said, surprised she remembered. "My last agency had a lot of hotel clients." "What's the biggest mistake you saw them make?" she asked. I blinked. Trying to be everything. Families and digital nomads and honeymooners and retirees. They'd watered down their message so much they ended up with, "We have beds," Mateo snorted. Rachel smiled without looking up. "Exactly," Alyssa said, gesturing with the marker. "We're not selling beds. We're selling something specific. We just have to make Briley decide what that is." She ran the meeting the way she always used to run our study sessions focused. Clear, making space for everyone's voice without ever losing control of the direction. It was disorienting, seeing the girl who'd once pulled all-nighters in my dorm room scaffold entire campaigns like she was building a bridge. And it was worse in a sneaky, traitorous way, how easy it was to slip back into the rhythm of working with her. 2 days later, we were on our third brainstorming session. The client wanted options. Briley by the sea, Briley in the city. Briley as a state of mind. I stayed late voluntarily. Half because I wanted to prove I was worth what they were paying me. Half because the idea of going back to my small, too quiet apartment felt like losing a fight with myself. At 7:30, most of the floor had emptied out. Computer screens glowed like aquarium glass. Someone's forgotten mug sat in the sink, a ring of coffee drying at the bottom. I was in a conference room with Alyssa, laptops open, mood boards spread out like a crime scene. "I keep coming back to this," I said, gesturing at a photo. "The idea of small rituals. The hotel is the place where you get to be your favorite version of yourself. Not the spa packages, not the thread count, but the moment you exhale and drop the suitcase and decide who you're going to be for the weekend." "That's actually good," she said, tapping her pen against the table. "We could build a whole angle around that. Micro stories, check into your other life or something." I scribbled down the phrase. "We'd have to be careful not to make it sound like running away from your terrible regular life," I said, then realized too late what I'd said. My mouth clicked shut. Alyssa's pen stilled. "Our terrible regular lives," she said quietly. "Right." Silence padded into the room and sat down between us. "This coffee is terrible," she said suddenly, picking up her paper cup as if she could see my panic. "I'm not sure what crime the machine committed in a past life, but this is definitely its punishment." Relief washed over me, weird and disproportionate. "There's a cafe around the corner," I blurted. "They're open till 9. "I can. Walk with me," she said, standing. "We'll charge it to the project. Consider it creative fuel." On the street, the air smelled like rain that hadn't quite committed. We walked side by side, just far enough apart that our arms didn't brush. Neon signs blinked. Buses wheezed past. For 10 steps, we were back on campus, walking to the 24-hour diner after a marathon editing session, arguing about fonts instead of feelings. "I saw your promotion," I heard myself say, then wanted to kick something. "On LinkedIn. Last year." "Oh," she said. Stalker. I flushed. It popped up in my feed. I'm kidding, she said quickly. I saw yours too. The senior account role at Bramble and Finch, in your campaign for the eco resort. It was good. Smart. A strange warmth pooled under my ribs. You saw that? Yeah, she said, pushing the door of the cafe open. I've been following your work since graduation. You always had a better instinct for audience than I did. I wanted to see where that went. We ordered coffees we couldn't quite justify, sitting at a small table by the window while the barista pretended not to eavesdrop. This is weird, right? I said, finally. What, the coffee? Alyssa asked. Or the part where I'm your boss now? I flinched. Both, she wrapped her hands around the cardboard cup. I didn't know you were joining, she said. If you're wondering, HR doesn't always loop me in on names until right before orientation. When I saw you walk into that room, I thought I was hallucinating. Disappointed hallucination, or... I asked, aiming for light, landing somewhere near Brittle. She met my eyes. No, she said softly. Not disappointed. I didn't know what to do with that. We can keep this professional, she added quickly. If that's what you want. We should... A wry smile tugged at her mouth. God knows the situation is already on the edge of an HR training video. I laughed, despite myself. You mean, don't hire your X100 one? Exactly, she said. But you're good, Maya. I want you on this project because you're good. Not because we have history. History. The words scraped at the scab I'd built over years. I'm here to work, I said, because that was the only safe truth I had. Whatever happened before. I can leave it outside. Her jaw flexed. Can you? She asked, then shook her head. No, that's not fair. I couldn't. I stared down at the swirl of foam in my cup. Why? I asked, before I could stop myself. Because I've thought about you every time I hired someone that reminded me of you, she said. Because every time I wrote a creative brief about reinvention or second chances, you were there, somewhere in the word count. That was too much. Too close. We should get back, I said, standing abruptly. Briley isn't going to reposition itself. Right, she said, following. Back at the office, we worked for another hour, almost in silence. The air between us crackled with things unsaid. At 9, she closed her laptop. Go home, she said. You've already done more in 3 days than most new hires manage in 3 weeks. Take the win. I packed my bag, slid my notebook into it, and hesitated at the door. Thanks, I said. For what? She asked. For defending my ideas in front of Mateo earlier, I said. He listens to you. He should listen to you, she said. They all should. Later, lying in my too quiet apartment, I stared at the ceiling while city noise threaded through the thin walls. I'd promised myself I was done with romance. With complications. With women whose lives were stuffed full of ambition and chaos and unresolved trauma. Now here I was 3 days into a new job, making mood boards at midnight and cataloging the tiny changes in my ex-girlfriend's face. It wasn't that I hadn't healed, I realized, staring into the dark. It was that I'd never actually tried. I'd just put the wound in a nicer outfit, called it independence, and hoped no one looked too closely. The miscommunication that nearly blew everything up started with 3 unread emails and a poorly worded Slack message. The Briley campaign had entered what the agency affectionately called the Chaos Tunnel, that special stage where every stakeholder suddenly remembered their opinions, and ideas proliferated like fruit flies. We were 2 weeks from launch. The client wanted to see a near-final deck by Friday. The dev team needed copy frozen by Wednesday. I had 3 spreadsheets open, 4 drafts of a landing page in progress, and a headache that felt like it had moved in permanently. On Tuesday afternoon, I sent updated copy to the dev team with the subject line, Finalish Briley copy pending Alyssa's sign-off. I CC'd Mateo. I made a note in the project management tool. Somewhere between my inbox and theirs, something went sideways. The dev team implemented the copy I'd sent. Someone in client services forwarded that link directly to Briley's VP of marketing, who clicked through, skimmed it, and fired off a politely horrified email about unexpected tone and off-brand language and concerns about strategic alignment. It landed directly in the inbox of our agency's CEO. Within 10 minutes, there was a meeting invite on my calendar, urgent Briley copy issue attendees. CEO. Alyssa Hart, account director, strategy lead. Maya Shah. My stomach dropped so hard I nearly hurt it. I've been in agencies long enough to know how this goes. Work flows downhill. Blame flows down faster. I sat outside the conference room, palms damp, watching the seconds tick toward the top of the hour. You did everything right, I told myself. You flagged it as draft? You CC'd people? You didn't hit send to the client. This isn't your fault. That's not how the story usually works, though. The story goes, young coordinator screws up. Senior people swoop in to fix it. Lesson learned. Be grateful you still have a job. The conference room door opened. Alyssa stepped out, spotting me immediately. Hey, she said, coming over. Walk with me for a second? Panic flared. If I'm being fired, can we just do it quickly? I asked, trying to joke and failing. Her brow creased. You're not being fired, she said. Come on. She led me to the balcony off the creative flora, sliver of concrete with a view of the adjacent building's air conditioning units. Okay, she said, leaning back against the railing. What do you know? That I messed up and sent unapproved copy to the client, and now everyone's going to hate me forever, I said in one breath. You didn't, she said. You sent draft copy to Dev. Someone else sent it on without reading your subject line. I blinked. You're sure? Yes, she said. I checked the email chain, and the timestamps, and the project notes, and your Slack messages. You did everything right, Maya? My eyes stung unexpectedly. Then why am I in the urgent meeting? Because they need someone who actually understands the work in the room, she said. The CEO's panicking about the client. Mateo's spinning. I want you there to walk us through your thinking so they don't throw out good work because of one avoidable misstep. And if they decide they want someone to blame? I asked. She held my gaze. They'll have to go through me first, she said. And I'm very annoying when I go into protective mode. I laughed weakly. I remember. Her mouth quirked. Yeah, you do. Back in the conference room, the air was already thick with performance anxiety. The CEO frowned at a printout of the landing page. I don't understand why we're talking about alternate lives, he said. Briley wants to be accessible luxury, not existential therapy. Mateo looked like he was about to pass out. The account director shuffled papers nervously. Can we all breathe? Alyssa said calmly, taking a seat. Maya, can you walk us through the concept? Every head swiveled toward me. I swallowed. Sure, I said. The alternate lives language isn't about abandonment. It's about intentionality. The idea is that when you check into a Briley hotel, you get to choose who you're going to be for the duration of your stay. The exhausted parent who finally sleeps. The writer who actually finishes a chapter. The couple who remembers why they liked each other before logistics took over. I slid a mood board across the table. We're not selling towels. We're selling a tiny moment where someone thinks, I get to be different here just for a little while. That's what the copy is trying to capture. The CEO's frown softened by a millimeter. And the client? They only saw an unfinished page out of context, Alyssa said smoothly. If we walk them through the full narrative, I think they'll understand. I've already set a call with their VP to do exactly that. I'll own the miscommunication. It shouldn't have gone to them that way. He blinked. You'll own it? Yes, she said. It's my team. My campaign. Maya flagged it as draft. Someone ignored that. That someone is not sitting at this table. Mateo exhaled quietly, shoulders sagging. The CEO glanced between us, calculating. Fine, he said. Handle it. I don't want Briley thinking we're sloppy. They won't, Alyssa said. They'll think we're thoughtful. The meeting ended without fireworks. People filed out, murmuring about timelines. I gathered my notes with shaking hands. When the room had emptied, I turned to her. Why did you do that? I asked. Because it was the truth, she said. And because I'm not going to let the first big thing you touch here turn into a cautionary tale when it doesn't have to. You didn't have to defend me, I said. You could have just stayed neutral. Let them assume whatever. Her jaw worked. Is that what you think I did before? She asked quietly. The question hung there loaded. This isn't college, I said, dodging. You're not responsible for my feelings. No, she said. But I'm responsible for how you're treated on my team. Why? I press, suddenly angry. Why do you care so much? We haven't spoken in 5 years, Alyssa. You left. You blocked my number. You didn't answer my emails. And now you're defending my work and buying me coffee and acting like what? She snapped. Like I didn't spend the last 5 years wanting to explain but not knowing how to say. I chose wrong without sounding like a coward. The words hit like a door slamming. Why did you leave? I asked. The question had been waiting for years. No speeches, no, it's not you. It's the timing, no proper goodbye. Just silence. I thought we were going to figure it out. The distance. The jobs. And then we were just gone. She sank into one of the chairs, suddenly looking less like a director and more like the woman I used to hold while she cried over exam stress. My mom got sick, she said finally. Really sick. Stage 4, too late sick. I went home for what I thought would be a week, and it turned into months. I was trying to freelance, trying to be there for her, trying not to fall apart. You could have told me, I said. My voice came out small. I would have... What? She cut in, eyes flashing. Dropped everything? Left your final year? Moved to a town with no jobs in your field? I saw you, Maya. I knew how badly you wanted out. How much you'd worked to get those internships, those contacts. I didn't want you to throw that away for me. It wouldn't have been for you, I said. It would have been for us. She laughed, harsh and self-directed. I was 22 and stupid and scared, she said. Every call we had, you were exhausted from work and classes and trying to make rent. I was sleeping on a pull-out in my childhood living room, listening to my mother throw up at 3 a.m. I didn't know how to be in love and be that miserable at the same time without resenting you eventually. So you left, I said, numb. I didn't mean to just disappear, she said. At first, I told myself I'd call tomorrow. Then the next day. Then a week went by. Then 2. Every minute I didn't call made it harder to imagine calling. I thought, maybe if I cut it clean, you'd hate me and move on fast. Least painful option. For you! You don't get to decide what hurts me less, I said, throat tight. That's not how that works. I know that now, she said. Believe me. There hasn't been a day in the last 5 years I haven't replayed that decision and wanted to rip it out of the timeline and start again. I thought of all the nights I'd sat on my couch, scrolling through her frozen profile picture, trying to decode what I'd done wrong. Why didn't you say any of this then? I whispered. Because somewhere along the line, she said, the story stopped being, I'm bad at communicating under extreme stress, and became, I'm the villain who abandoned you. And I let it, because it was easier to hate myself in private than it was to ask you to forgive me. We sat there, the hum of the aircon the only sound. She looked smaller somehow. Not the fully formed adult I built in my head, but a woman who'd made a terrible choice for what she thought were good reasons. I'm not the only one who was hurt, she added quietly. You were too. You don't owe me anything. Not your understanding. Not your friendship. Definitely not your forgiveness. I just needed you to know it wasn't because I didn't love you." The word landed with a soft, brutal weight. "I loved you so much it scared me," she said. "And when everything else in my life started collapsing, I panicked. I thought if I cut out the part that made me the happiest, I'd have less to lose." "That's not how math works," I said, voice shaking. "I failed every subject that year except worst way to break a heart," she said. "I got an A in that without even trying." A laugh broke out of me, startled and unwilling. It dissolved into a sob at the edges. "I spent years imagining you as some cold, ambitious villain who just moved on," I admitted. "It was easier than picturing you crying in your childhood living room." "I wish I'd been the villain," she said. "Villains at least do things with agency." She leaned forward, elbows on her knees. "I'm sorry, Maya," she said. Not in the vague time has passed way, specifically, for hanging up in the middle of an argument and never calling back. For blocking your number because every ping made me want to throw up. For letting you think you didn't matter. My hands twisted in my lap. "You hurt me," I said, because it needed to be said nakedly. "I know," she whispered. "And I don't expect that to disappear because I finally grew a spine now." I looked at her properly, at the fine lines at the corners of her eyes, at the exhaustion that wasn't just from late nights at the office. For the first time, I saw her not as the girl who'd broken me, but as a person who'd also been broken. It didn't erase the anger, but it did something else. It loosened it, gave it somewhere else to go. "Okay," I said finally. "Now I know. Is that better?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "And worse and necessary." We sat there until the fluorescent lights flickered, a sign from the building that it was tired of our drama. "I have a call with Bradley in 10, she said, standing. "You should go home." "This has been a lot. Will you be okay?" I asked, habit. She smiled sadly. "I've survived worse days," she said, including the one where I realized I'd made the biggest mistake of my 20s. "Which was?" I asked softly. "Thinking I was protecting you," she said, "when really I was just protecting myself from watching you choose me. There's no switch you can flip that turns hurt into fine. What happens instead is a series of small, almost imperceptible shifts. After the conversation in the conference room, things didn't magically fall into place. There was no montage of trust being rebuilt over indie music. There were awkward mornings when we ran into each other at the coffee machine and both reached for the same mug. There were meetings where our eyes met across the table and skittered away like teenagers. There were also slowly moments. A week later, I caught a cold that turned murderous halfway through a Wednesday. My head pounded. My throat felt like sandpaper. I stubbornly tried to push through the day until a coughing fit in the middle of a stand-up left me. Bent over my laptop, eyes watering. "Go home," Alyssa said firmly when the others had filed out. "That's an order." "I'm fine," I croaked. "You sound like a car starting in winter," she said. "You're not fine. I'll move your afternoon check-ins. Go." I did, grudgingly. 2 hours later, my doorbell rang. I shuffled to the door in sweatpants and an oversized sweatshirt, hair in a disastrous bun. Alyssa stood there holding a plastic grocery bag. "You're supposed to text before showing up at a sick person's house," I said, embarrassed. "You sound marginally better," she said. "That's something. Can I come in?" I hesitated. Letting her into my space felt like another line. Then I remembered the grocery bag. "Do you have soup?" I asked. "And ginger tea, and those disgusting cough drops you like, and tissues that won't sand your nose off," she said. "I terrorized the pharmacist on your behalf." I stepped aside. "Come in." She moved through my tiny apartment with a familiarity that hurt, even though she'd never been in this particular space before. She put the soup in a pot without asking where anything was, found the mugs on the second try. We sat on my couch, mugs cradled between us. "You didn't have to do this," I said, when the tea scalded my tongue. "I know," she said. "I wanted to." "Why?" I asked. The question had become a refrain. "Because apparently my love language is acts of service and catastrophic decision-making," she said. "I'm trying to lean more on the first one." I snorted, then coughed. She handed me a tissue without comment. We talked a little about safe things. The ridiculous demands from another client. The intern who kept mixing up the snack orders. My brother's impending graduation. When she left later, she paused at the door. "Text me if your fever spikes," she said. "I mean that. I can't fix everything I broke, but I can make sure you don't die of preventable dehydration." "Yes, boss," I said, saluting weakly. Her mouth curved. "Don't call me that outside the office," she said. "It does weird things to my brain." The next day my fever broke. Whether that was the tea, the soup, or her presence, I tried not to analyze. We fell into a pattern. At work, we slowly relaxed around each other. Our meetings regained some of the ease they'd had in college group projects, minus the shared Spotify playlists and cheap pizza. We started joking again. Not constantly, not like before, but enough that the air didn't crackle with tension every minute. "Remember when you thought Comic Sans was quirky?" She teased once, looking at an ancient campaign concept I'd done for a charity. "I was 19, I protested. My brain wasn't finished." "It's still not," she said. "You trust people too easily." "Not anymore," I retorted. She sobered slightly. "Fair," she said. "I suppose you have data to support that." We also talked cautiously about the intervening years. She told me about her mother's death, about the quiet horror of hospice care, about the way grief settled into her bones like weather. I told her about my ex after her, the woman I dated for a year who loved my independence until it made her feel unnecessary, about the way that breakup had been quiet and polite and somehow just as painful. "You always love too hard," Alyssa said. "All in all the time." "You always loved like you were waiting for the fire alarm," I shot back. She winced but didn't argue. One evening, we stayed late again, finalizing the last pieces of the Briley pitch. The office was almost empty, the city outside turning to a smear of lights through the windows. I stared at the deck on my screen, words blurring. "This is good," Alyssa said, looking over my shoulder. "Really good. Are you saying that as my creative director or as my guilt-ridden ex?" I asked. She smiled ruefully. "Both," she said. "Unfortunately, they agree." I hesitated. "You made a joke about HR training videos earlier." "I remember," she said. "Would it even be allowed?" I asked. "If something happened with us, again, you being my boss, power imbalance, all that. If something happened," she repeated. "Is that a hypothetical?" "Yes," I said too quickly. She stepped back, giving me space. "You're right to worry about it," she said. "It's not a small thing. When we were 21, the biggest ethical dilemma we had was whether to steal condiments from the dining hall. Now I sign your performance reviews." I made a face. "Romantic." "I'm serious," she said. If you ever did want to try anything, I'd have to change the reporting structure. Get you a different direct manager. Put clear boundaries in place. Otherwise, it's not really a choice for you, is it? It's coercion dressed up as a second chance. Hearing her say it out loud, naming the thing I'd been guiltily thinking about in the dark, both hurt and helped. "So what are we doing right now?" I asked quietly. "Are we friends?" "I hope so," she said. "At least, eventually. Right now, I think we're two people trying very hard not to repeat the worst mistake of our 20s. "Which one?" I asked. "The running or the silence?" "Both," she said. She looked tired again. Not just late night tired. Life tired. "I meant what I said," she added. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for The chance to show you I'm not that girl anymore. But if you did ever decide to trust me again, I wouldn't disappear. Can you guarantee that? I asked. No, she said simply. People get sick. Jobs change. Buildings catch fire. But I can guarantee I won't run because I'm afraid of losing you while pretending it's for your own good. I've retired that particular brand of cowardice. I sighed. I don't know what I want, I admitted. Some days I look at you and all I feel is anger. Others it's nostalgia. And sometimes it's just this weird ache. Like I'm looking at a life I might have had if we'd both been less stupid. You're allowed all of that, she said. You can even hate me some days and still want to work together. Human beings are complicated. News at 11. But what do you want? I asked. She swallowed. I want to earn a version of us that isn't built on guilt and fear, she said. I want the chance to show you who I am now. And I want, selfishly, to see who you are when you're not bracing for impact. That's a lot of wanting, I said, heart beating too fast. I've had 5 years to practice, she said softly. The Briley presentation was on a Thursday morning, in a hotel ballroom that smelled like carpet cleaner, old air conditioning, and catered coffee that had been kept warm for 1 hour too long. We'd rehearsed every slide, every transition, every question we thought they might ask. I had written and rewritten my sections so many times that the words felt like someone else's, like a script I'd been born knowing. It didn't stop my brain from waking me up twice in the night, convinced I'd forgotten my notes or my laptop, or that the file had somehow eaten itself and replaced our carefully built pitch with a picture of a sad, stock photo family in matching bathrobes. In the elevator up to the conference floor, Alyssa stood beside me, looking infuriatingly calm in a navy suit that fit like it had been stitched directly onto her body. She smelled faintly of citrus and coffee. Her hair was pulled back in a way that made her jawline look even sharper. You ready? She asked, eyes on the floor, numbers lighting up. No, I said, but I'm going to do it anyway. Good, she said. That's all readiness ever really is. I huffed a laugh that came out more like a puff of steam. You know, that's not how my nervous system works, right? That's why I'm saying it out loud, she replied. So your nervous system can get used to the idea. The door slid open onto a corridor full of patterned carpet and aggressively neutral framed art. Kind of hallway that has seen too many conferences and not enough rest. We walked toward the ballroom, our steps in sync, her stride slightly longer than mine the way it had always been. Our shoulders didn't touch, but the awareness of her next to me was a constant, quiet pressure. Inside, the Briley team was already gathering VPs in suits. A brand manager in an on-trend jumpsuit, someone from their digital team in a company hoodie and expensive sneakers. The big screen showed our opening slide, check into your other life. The tagline sat there, black on white, looking deceptively simple, like it hadn't taken weeks of debate to get there. I shook hands, remembered names, did all the things a functioning adult does. My hands were only trembling a little. The presentation itself was a blur. I remember the VP of marketing nodding at the alternate live section, his fingers tapping on the table in a rhythm that sounded like agreement. I remember someone from their branding team saying, I love that, in a way that sounded like an actual compliment, not performative. We're all creatives here, noise. I remember Alyssa at the front of the room, a steady presence, guiding us through the narrative, but every time a question touched my parts of the deck, she deferred to me. Maya can speak to that, she said, over and over. That was Maya's insight. Each time, it anchored me a little more in my own competence. I remember not stumbling on my sections. Not once. My voice didn't crack. My hands didn't shake visibly when I clicked the remote. I made a joke about we're not selling beds, we're selling micro resets that actually got a small laugh. It was, by all measurable metrics, a success. Afterwards, when the Briley team filed out to make a show of discussing internally, my knees wobbled with adrenaline. The leftover coffee on the side table smelled like burnt rubber. The hotel event coordinator hovered, already thinking about the next meeting and how to flip the room. I leaned against the wall just for a second, willing my legs to remember how to be legs. "You were incredible," Alyssa said, appearing in front of me with a bottle of water. "Seriously, if they don't sign off on this, it's because they have terrible taste. Coming from you. That's high praise," I managed, unscrewing the cap with fingers that felt like they belonged to a slightly tipsy marionette. "Well," she said, "I did teach you everything you know. You taught me how to pull an all-nighter on vending machine coffee and survive on fumes," I said. "The rest I picked up myself." She smiled, then sobered. The shift was small, but I felt it like a draft. "Walk with me?" she asked. "Is this going to become a brand?" I asked weakly. "Walk with Me by Alyssa Hart for all your emotionally devastating conversations." She huffed a laugh. "Something like that." We ducked out a side door and into a bland staff corridor. Gray walls, vinyl flooring, emergency exit signs buzzing faintly. It was the least glamorous route to a roof I'd ever seen. We took the service elevator up. It smelled like metal and cleaning fluid and a hint of fried something from the kitchen floors below. In the reflection of the brushed metal doors, our faces hovered side by side. My lipstick had faded slightly at the corners. A strand of hair had escaped the clip I'd so carefully installed that morning. Her eyes met mine in the reflection for a second, softer than they'd been downstairs. When the doors opened, we stepped out onto the rooftop. It wasn't the fancy kind of rooftop you see on Instagram with a bar and fairy lights and curated potted plants. It was a flat expanse of concrete with HVAC units, vents, and a view of the city that made even the ugliest buildings look romantic from a distance. The wind tugged at my hair and slipped under the collar of my blazer. Ant-sized cars moved slowly below. The sky was a washed-out blue that promised a decent afternoon and a colder evening. "So," she said, shoving her hands in our pockets, "we need to talk." I wrapped my arms around myself, partly against the wind, partly against the feeling of my ribcage trying to climb out of my body. "That sounds bad," I said. "It's not," she said. "Or it doesn't have to be. I don't want to keep pretending this is neutral." "This?" I echoed, as if maybe she meant something else. "The weather, the campaign, the fact that my heart was doing cardio without my consent." "You," she said. "Me, the way my stomach does weird gymnastics every time you walk into a room. The way my day feels wrong if I don't see you at least once. The way I keep catching myself imagining what it would be like to come home and talk about anything other than work with you." The words hung there, carried away, and then brought back by the wind. "Alyssa," I began, heart climbing into my throat. "I know," she said quickly, hands up like she was calming a skittish animal. "You're still hurt. You're still figuring out what you want. We work together. There's a power imbalance. There are 1,000 reasons this is a spectacularly bad idea. And yet," I asked. It came out more curious than I expected. "And yet," she said, "I haven't stopped loving you. Not in the messy, obsessive, you're my whole universe way of 21. She shook her head slightly, smiling at some private memory. "In the stubborn, adult way of 27, I've dated other people. I've tried. But it always felt like comparing drafts to the piece I actually wanted to write." Tears pricked my eyes unexpectedly. "That's a terrible analogy," I said weakly. "And also, unfair to every woman you've dated." "I know," she said. I didn't say it out loud to them. "Great," I said. "Lucky me." She took a breath, visible in the chill air. "I'm not asking you to forget," she said. "Or to leap. I'm asking for a chance. To restructure your role so I'm not your manager. To build some distance at work so that if you choose me, it's not because I sign your timesheets, but because you want me. As I am now. Mess and all." I stared at her. "You give up having me on your team?" I asked. "After all this?" She laughed softly, the sound snagging on something rough. I'd much rather have you in my life than hoard you in my org chart, she said. We can hire another brilliant account coordinator. We can't hire another you. The wind gusted, whipping hair into my mouth. I pushed it away, heart pounding in that awful, thrilling way that meant something was shifting. Do you regret? US? I asked. College. The long distance. Any of it? No, she said, immediately and without drama. I regret how I left. I regret not letting you decide what you were willing to sacrifice. I regret being so afraid of losing you that I cut you out like an infected tooth. But I don't regret loving you. I never will. She took a few steps closer, leaving enough space that I could step back if I wanted to. Her shoes made little scuffing sounds on the concrete. If you tell me no, she said, voice steady but eyes bright, I'll respect it. Completely, I'll still get you off my team because this is messy enough as it is. I'll be your colleague, your ally, your pain in the ass creative director. I'll never push. Not again. But if there is even a small part of you that wonders, if we could do this better the second time? She trailed off, swallowing. I watched the movement of her throat, the tension in her jaw. I'd like to try, she finished. This time without running. From either side, silence stretched, broken only by the distant honk of traffic below and the low mechanical hum of the rooftop units. I thought about the last few months in high-definition flashes, her shoulder brushing mine as we bent over a whiteboard. The gentle way she'd adjusted my laptop charger when it got caught under the chair. Her voice softening when she told me about her mother. The taste of bad coffee and half-swallowed apologies in the break room. I thought about the hurt, the years of silence, the nights I'd stared at my phone, willing a message to appear that never did. The way my chest had felt hollow, like a building after a fire, the char smell lingering long after the flames were out. I thought about my new life, the job I'd fought for, the apartment I painted myself, the carefully rebuilt self that didn't need anyone, the pride I'd taken in sentences that started with I instead of we. And I thought about the girl I'd been at 21, sitting on a dorm room floor watching Alyssa's sketch campaign ideas in her notebook, thinking with terrifying clarity, oh, it's you. That girl had been brave enough to love recklessly, with no contingency plan. Maybe this older version of me could be brave enough to love. Deliberately. I'm scared, I said, because I'd promised myself I'd start with the truth now. Of getting hurt again. Of becoming the girl the creative director is sleeping with in office gossip. Of losing you a second time in a new, worse way. Me, too, she said. On all counts. Well, except the gossip. I already terrify them too much for it to be that simple. I huffed out a laugh that tasted like tears. Of course you do. I can't promise it won't hurt sometimes, she said. That's not how love works. But I can promise I won't make unilateral decisions for your own good anymore. If we do this, we do it together. Equal say. Equal risk. And work? I asked. The practical part of my brain clung to procedure like a life raft. We can't just pretend this is a rom-com and HR is a quirky side character. I've already drafted an email to FR, she said. 2. Actually, one where I recuse myself from your line management immediately, and one where I explain that we're exploring a personal relationship and want to do it by the book. Of course you have 2 drafts, I muttered. You report to Mateo officially, she went on. I'll step back from your evaluations, promotions, salary conversations. I'll still be in the same building, but structurally you'll have a different boss. And if they say no? I asked. If HR says it's against policy or too complicated, or whatever they say when they're thinking about liability instead of people. Then we talk, she said. We decide together whether the job or us matters more. I won't decide for you. Not again. I'm done staging breakups in my head and calling it protection. I searched her face. The familiar features. The new steadiness. The way she held herself differently, now not all frenetic energy, but coiled intention. I never stopped loving you either, I said quietly, the words surprising me with how easily they came. I tried. I dated other people. I built a whole life that didn't include you. But there was always this shadow, this unfinished sentence. When you walked into that conference room, I wanted to throw something at you and hug you at the same time. Throwing things is still on the table, she said gently. Hugging too. I smiled, a little shaky. I don't know how to start, I admitted. We're not those girls anymore. Good, she said. Those girls were idiots. I laughed, properly this time, the sound startling a small flock of pigeons from a nearby ledge. So we start small, she suggested. Coffee that isn't a work emergency. Dinner that isn't a post-presentation decompression. Conversations where we're not hiding behind briefs or brand X. No, we should totally catch up texts that never happen, I added. No more ghosting, she agreed. From either of us. If you're overwhelmed, you say it. If I'm screwing up, you say it. Out loud. Not in your journal. You remember my journal? I asked, half amused. You wrote in it like it was a full-time job, she said. I suspected I was getting the heavily edited version. And if it doesn't work? I asked. The fear was still there, but it felt less like a wall and more like a threshold. If we realized the only thing we had in common was being young and overwhelmed, and good at kissing in library stairwells, then we'll grieve it, she said. And we'll still be two adults who tried, honestly, instead of two cowards who let fear keep writing our story. I looked out over the city. So many windows. So many lives. So many people making choices based on fear, on inertia, on scripts handed to them by other people's mistakes. If I stayed perfectly safe, nothing would break. But nothing would grow either. I turned back to her. Okay, I said. The word felt small and huge at the same time. Let's try carefully. Slowly, but let's try. This time, if you run, I'm changing the locks on your favorite coffee shop. Her breath left her in a rush I don't think she'd realized she was holding. Her shoulders dropped a fraction. Deal, she said. She took a step closer, close enough now that I could see the tiny flecks of gold in her brown eyes. May I? She asked, voice barely above the wind. A simple question. A luxury we hadn't afforded each other properly when we were younger. Yes, I said. She leaned in, kissing me gently. Not the desperate crash of college, all hands and urgency and the underlying fear that someone would walk in at any second. Just a soft, certain press of lips. A hello instead of a plea. A promise of we'll see, not don't leave. Heat unfurled low in my chest, winding around the ache and turning it into something else, less sharp, more molten. When we pulled back, she rested her forehead against mine for a second, her breath mingling with mine. Second chances are weird, I murmured. They are, she agreed. But sometimes the sequel is better written. Don't ever use another writing metaphor about us, I said. It's too on the nose. She laughed, and I felt it against my mouth. We stood there for a moment longer, just breathing the same cold air, before stepping apart. Okay, she said briskly, slipping her professional mask back on, but I could see the softness underneath now. We should go back down before Mateo starts pacing a hole in the carpet. Let him pace, I said, but I followed her to the stairwell door. We walked back into the hotel side by side, not touching because the world didn't need to know yet. Not until we'd figured out what, exactly, this was. Not until HR had had their say and we'd filled out whatever forms two adult women in love had to fill out to make other adults less nervous. Later, after Brierly signed off on the campaign enthusiastically, with talk of future work and strategic partnership, and the office burst into congratulations and someone brought in donuts that disappeared in under 10 minutes, I packed up my laptop. The buzz of the wind hummed under everything. People clapped me on the shoulder, tossed me compliments, told me I'd crushed it. For once, I let the praise land instead of deflecting it with a joke. At the elevator, she caught my eye across the open plan chaos. "Dinner?" she mouthed, tilting her head toward the doors. My pulse did a little, ridiculous leap. I nodded. We didn't walk out together in a cinematic, hand-in-hand stride. We left separately, a few minutes apart, the way you do when you've spent enough time alive to know that stories are rarely straightforward. But outside, a little way down the street, she waited under the awning of a cafe, hands tucked into her coat pockets, watching for me. We fell into step as naturally as we had in college. Like our bodies were relieved, we finally caught up to the conversation our hearts had been having in private. We walked out of the building that evening with the setting sun turning the windows gold and the wind a little less sharp on my face. Not as boss and employee. Not as exes orbiting each other with worn-out resentment and unsaid things. Just two women, older, bruised, still here. Two women finally ready to stop letting fear drive. Life doesn't always hand out second chances. Sometimes it just loops back on itself, offering a slightly different angle on an old wound. A rooftop instead of a dorm room. A navy suit instead of a band t-shirt. A question asked out loud instead of swallowed and turned into a story you tell yourself in the dark. This time, when the past followed me into my new life, I didn't run. I took its hand hers and felt her fingers curl around mine, warm and very, very real. And together we stepped forward.